All right, so Poynting Antennas and Dr. Andre Fourie. Not going to say keep it simple, keep it real today. Well, I am going to keep it real. So, Andre, thanks a lot for joining me. And yeah, on this kind of first podcast and chat on companies. And of course, Poynting Antennas is close to heart for me. And we've been presenting your antennas for quite a while now. And like kind of the feedback we're getting on the stuff we do, the 4G mobility and also the yeah, houses and so forth. It's phenomenal. So for sure, I'm quite happy to use your product. So thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me, David. I think we talked just before, and I'm an admirer of online marketing. I mean, we've just decided that's the world, and you part of the ones that showed us the way. Amazing for honestly, I mean, I think you've realized that this is the way to communicate to people. I say that people normally nowadays find, well, both information and companies. They find them actually, so websites are important, very important, I think, but websites are important for the background substance. We used to want to have people find our website, but they now find us somewhere else and then most probably go to the website to get a complete story. For people that I've known, David, actually for many years, and you got this close to working for us, yeah?
I know, and that's probably the worst start to my career. Is
No,
it
no,
was
I think you did great. And then next time I saw you were disappearing to Australia, and then we started encountering you with RF Shop. I think when we started talking to you, we were really almost just starting. Now, I don't know if anyone of your viewers and customers know, but I mean, David I was like one of the really, really accomplished antenna, or is. I'm not saying was, but it's not that visible when you speak to me. Presents things so simply, but I've got a saying. I lectured myself as a professor at university for over 20 years. I mean, even while I had the company going, it's certainly one of the reasons we could also attract very high quality people. But the guy that can say it the simplest is often the guy that knows the most. So people should take into account when they hear your very, very clear descriptions. That doesn't mean the guy doesn't know, but everything behind it. Because to be simple and still correct needs knowledge.
I'm actually totally humbled here. I really appreciate that. I mean, I guess just a short, simple story from my side about 2020, was it 22 years ago or so, that I had the interview with you. And then, of course, for various reasons that I didn't take that opportunity. And then only a few months later did I realize you were my external examiner that I wasn't supposed to know about for my master's degree. So I was so scared. I just told this professor I'm not working for him, and now he needs to pass me on my master's. So it went fine.
And he did a great job as far as I recall.
Yes, no, no. And that kind of led into me knowing a lot about pointing at the beginning. And then, of course, when I think the key thing for me, if I think about what exactly made me decide, what was it, 3 years ago almost, about let's really go again towards pointing was, I mean, there's many products. I always loved all the products that's there, but the game changer for me was when you launched the Xpol 2 version 3, which was 5G ready. That kind of just said, no, we need to get into this one. And it's been like that for me since then. That antenna has been one of our best sellers, and I understand why, because it's just an awesome product. But I guess enough about me. What about yourself and pointing? You've even gone through a rebranding recently, or at least just got rid of the pointing vector.
I hated it, David. It was my baby, that vector, because pointing actually means it's the guy that defined power flow. And that served us well because we started in a high-tech type area where people knew the name. And that previous logo was, of course, the actual vector. So it's such a graphic thing. But it was getting old-fashioned.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting there. There's our
Correct. That,
pointing
that, that
vector.
was the company logo. And I think it was great.
Yeah.
And everyone said, no ways, Andre's never going to go for this. And then I just realized, it's like many things that, what we had then is more fresh. And I think we realized that up to now, we've often been the company that says we technically this, we do the best. So we were talking technical when you go to our website, you just sensed high tech, not high tech, knowledgeable people, and I've got to a stage where the antenna brand, I think, got much wider acceptance. We can talk about that. It's really surprising for a South African company that because we sell about 85% of our products worldwide, and it's first world markets. It's Europe, America, Australia, essentially. Those are the three big markets. And I realized that one need to change this thing. We talk to people. In other words, you no longer want to say. I think once you've convinced people in the beginning, it's a small country, you feel a little bit of inferiority complex, I suppose. You want to say we really know what we're doing and so forth. I think that got accepted, and it's much more important to say to people what it will mean to them. So ignore a little bit what we know, great antenna. You want to say, how does this help the guy out there? Why would he be buying it and so forth? And that's, I suppose, a big part of the rebranding. So you can see we changed just our language and imagery and so forth to relate to people. So I always say there's two types of species on Earth, and David, there's engineers and there's humans. So I always say,
That's true.
we stand, we try to pretend to be human, but we're not really. So I realized that the human part is where we deal with, and we try to change it that way, and got a bit more confidence, I suppose, because it's confidence. Let's face it, it's a little bit of lack of confidence to try to show to people, I'm better than this, I'm good, type of thing. And I suppose ultimately one hopes to reach the point, because what I've realized, I try to educate people. You say to people, look, our antenna is actually a lot better here if you look at the detail we spoke about omnis, where my famous rule is that the lower gain, because people look at specs, the better the antenna. Because you have to look at the pattern. It says omni, but if it doesn't actually radiate in all directions, that's not a spec. And the gain is just the best in one direction. Now, I will never be able. That's what I realize. I'll never be able to speak. I can speak to my distributors and so forth. The moment I explain and show them a picture, they know immediately. Okay, why is this antenna of Poynting that's got a lower gain spec actually? And often dramatically better antenna than one with a higher spec. But I can't go everywhere and tell people that. I can tell these guys. But like they say, the guys go to our websites, our resellers' websites, they just search for gain and so forth. And what it comes down to is antennas very much like speakers and a number of other type of things we buy, cars and so forth. You ultimately have to get a brand where people and actually decide that, look, we've seen things and we've done things. These things work better than the others. In other words, get people's confidence. And I say to people, so we've got good engineers stuff. They look after, it's so complex to go see an antenna good. I have to explain to people, can't just, I hate field tests. I know they get done all over. I actually encourage people to do them. But I know it's luck of the draw. You will understand what I mean.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
comparisons of antennas in real life is exciting. And as humans, we love real life, okay? But if it's in a good signal area and people get shocked when I say a bad antenna will do as well as any pointing antenna. We've got enough signal, so that happens, okay? Then you've got this funny things with the antenna that's pattern is terrible compared to one that's good. If it happens to be in the right place, it will perhaps be looking better. So I'm always, but we are supposed to do well in 85% of the tests. But if you had one frequency, that's what people do, and they compare it to something else. So that thing happens to work at that frequency. Of course, may even be better, because to get it to work everywhere, of course, means that it most probably can't optimize it for one place. But a guy would go buy it in another place, another frequency. Frequencies went mad. So I think that's where I'm trying to get to win people's trust to a large extent. Of course, we still do educational stuff, and to many of the people that want to understand, I love telling them, but we try to talk to people, saying to them, you buy this thing, it's going to make your life better, get you better internet, and you can trust that it will work. And I think that was important that was the rebranding side.
For sure. I kind of have to keep relating to my experiences as you were talking, and the one thing you just mentioned at the end, the field testing. No, we do our YouTube channel, and it drives me nuts. Even just last weekend, I was playing with this new Nighthawk M6, and living off. And I'm in a suburb, so I have probably 3 base stations around me that I can work with. It's so hard to get the thing to do exactly what you want to do if you want to prove a point, because it's a live test. Even on the video that I ended up shooting and uploading, it jumped bands. And I didn't notice that initially. And I was like, oh man, this is not working. And then suddenly, my frequency changed again completely. So field test and live network testing, that's difficult. And it's very hard to judge things from one to the other.
I saw a guy, if you do speed tests on networks, I mean, I think they even hate it as well. That must probably, but that could be relevant, because now you are actually doing an A/B comparison. It's really on antennas where they become difficult. I mean, you need to see them work, and ultimately, I feel you need to evaluate them, unfortunately, in an anechoic chamber, just because where you are, you can't assess essentially all of the frequencies, all of the directions. And as simple as that. It's not that I say they only work in a lab, they work everywhere.
A conversation that I saw somebody else once, and they made a comment. It's also an antenna manufacturer. And he did say, and I kind of really have to agree with him, that the question was asked, what is a good antenna? And the guy just had this very simple answer. If an antenna manufacturer doesn't give you a data sheet and it doesn't give you some radiation patterns, now, of course, you have to trust what is given is correct. But if a company doesn't even give you that much information, there's sort of a lot of red flags already coming up. And that's just referring back to yourself pointing and so forth. That's one thing I just absolutely love about the data sheets, is they're so comprehensive. And you can really see what you can expect from the antennas because of the radiation patterns. Me as a YouTuber, that makes life very interesting, because then there's so much I could show about the same thing, like to explain this and that, and go all crazy.
To some extent, in that sense, an engineer that would be interested, like I say, that question, what makes a good antenna? I think as an engineer, you answered it perfectly, and perhaps it's a tick box, but it really is an antenna that meets your requirement. What I'm trying to say, as you know, antennas can do a hell of a lot of different things, and the one that's been designed that got the stuff in that you need. So if you want the LTE mobile connection in a certain country, and that's most probably the more comprehensive one for the human side, that the person just knows this guy's made in Australia, says all band, he says it's an omnidirectional antenna. Now, I agree with you. Good guy like you be able to assess all this, say, yeah, it's quite correct. But for the customers, does it do that? So, because he's not bought a higher gain, does it just do that? So that means engineers in the background need to know what frequencies operators are using, need to know what happens when things mount on cars. That complexity is almost what a good company will have to take care. And that antenna is not better than any other antenna, but does it do, in that very, very human way, when you sell it, does it do what it claims to do? And I suppose that is the level that you need to reach, and you need to reach that by doing that repeatedly, so that people can now trust the fuzzy statement, because 95% of the world out there will not actually be able to read the data sheet and interpret it, very much like I would be with another complex topic. And like I say, speakers is almost my favorite, and I don't want to fight speakers, but I say to people, I want to become the Bose of antennas. Now, just because I admire Bose speakers, they've been around many, many years. And you learn with speakers that guys will quote you power outputs and things like that. That used to also be like a big thing. And as many reliable companies, the one I'm mentioning is Bose, essentially because Bose also then started doing other things. They say a speaker is almost a fundamental of a sound system. And I feel that's the same case with antennas. So I think few people think of that. I always say the radio, the modem, you can get them expensive and cheap and so forth. But on the RF interface side, the only thing that makes the difference is the antenna, because the rest is determined by standards. No one makes a more powerful people make fantastic software stuff in the radio reliability, but the cheapest modem and the most expensive modem on, say, a certain category of LTE, exact same power, exact same sensitivity. That modem can't do better than any other in terms of the RF link. It is like on a speaker system or on a hi-fi system. It's it's actually just the speakers or the antennas that can differentiate the one from the other. And then I learned, when I bought the Bose little um, Bluetooth speaker, like, I asked the guy what's the power output. He couldn't even tell me. And that's where I realized I'm actually now happy enough that I'm buying this thing from Bose, it's a Bluetooth
Yes.
speaker, and it's going to be good performance, if you know what I mean. Because otherwise, any of the specs, even if you did tell me the power or could tell me the power output of the thing, pretty meaningless. It will most probably entice me to sort of now feel a little bad because there was a third of the price that claims I'll double the power output.
Nice.
Whereas these guys make it so that it does all the right stuff to my
Yeah.
music, and uh, I'm sort of happy to accept that.
Awesome. Now, Andre, you actually you mentioned, of course, that like you said, 85% of your antennas goes global. From a South African perspective, what is your main market, or are you kind of, you're really playing in the marine market and the mining market, and it kind of, you really have a finger in the on the pulse, not in the pie, but in all those markets, isn't it?
Not at all. I think that's, of course, another crucial thing that I've learned. You you have to decide where you can make a big difference. We're an innovative company. I think you've known that. And the place where life really started working, I was part of, I remember we did whole the company went into Wi-Fi, and that was still the wireless ISP, and we actually imploded because that was a very cheap, low-cost type of market. And then ultimately, Ubiquiti as a company just integrated it all, and then we almost had to do a restart. And I was part of a listed entity. Actually, took the company out of there because they wanted to close things down because we were battling. That was in 2014, and I actually bought out the company because I believed in it. And literally, some of the institutional guys said, "Look, we must close down," because we had a very successful, and still do, defense division, and that's now rebranded to Alaris Antennas. I'm still one of the major shareholders, but that's actually lovely because we need to carry on. And I had this belief in, call it the consumer, and still most probably Wi-Fi as well, but essentially the cellular mobile type of market. And where things really happened for us, David, because the company has seen a real high growth in the last 3, 4 years. I mean, amazing growth. And I suppose I've always been having this vision, and it took a little longer, which is, I suppose, why the listed guy said, hey, we want half and half performance. We can't sit and pour money into something where things suddenly got very complex. So many people will do consumer antennas, and you remember when it was 900 megs only, even a TV antenna could do a good job if you needed. Outdoor antennas was firstly unheard of, so we're lucky because we're living in Africa. People did often need outdoor antennas. So in the beginning, when I sold outdoor antennas, people were used to the little thingy that you got the little stuffy sticking out of it, and that's now 10 years back, 20 years back. And you say antenna, they say, I mean, this is these things have got small antennas. So right from the start, we also, I suppose, believed that cell phones will get beyond just voice, and the data will get beyond just giving you convenient mobile data. And I think that started happening definitely with 4G, and I think it's going to accelerate. I think we most probably still at the tip. But what happened is suddenly bands came with, okay, and because we came from this military background, and I would call it hardcore antenna people, many people had very simple antennas. I don't think the guys actually had that much antenna design capabilities. They were just trimming and getting things to match at different frequencies, so to speak. So bands increased and MIMO happened. So suddenly, and firstly, what I loved, right in the beginning, you either got voice or didn't get voice, okay? But the moment data got more complex, and I won't explain why, suddenly it made a difference to your speed if you get a better antenna. So whereas previously a guy would only buy it if it doesn't get, and then he gets, suddenly, and you have to teach people that often, even if you get your internet via your LTE, your 4G or 5G, you might be only getting a 10% of what you can get. So it's got this beautiful thing that it scales it up. And of course, MIMO does it even much bigger in the sense that it will be able to double your data rate, whatever, how good it was, and so forth. So antennas became much more important, and they caused a improvement, not only for people that can't get it and now want to get it. And the last thing is then suddenly I realized we're doing, and I'm proud of our antennas, but I'm not trying to say we're doing the best antennas in the world. And I can tell you now on things like the X-Pol 2 and our Omni antennas, a reason why I'm saying that is not, I'm not a salesperson, I'm an engineer, unfortunately. But I suddenly, and in fact, I didn't want to believe it, to be blunt. I mean, many of our sales divisions says, please give us a comparison to this antenna. And I thought I'll have to take it into my anechoic chamber and things. Then I opened the spec sheets, and these are good companies. They provide, like you say, radiation patterns. And I look at the patterns, and I can immediately see why ours is a lot better. But what I mean, that dramatically better. So there was directive antennas of competitors that some of the bands actually shoot their beams off the main axis. It's on their patterns. I mean, in us, they're not hiding it. They were just calculating specs, and the spec says where the gain occurs is the gain. But of course, in real life, if the gain is no longer in the direction you're pointing, so they're not lying. But I realized I can virtually open spec sheets. So I was opening spec sheet after spec sheet for different guys, and especially on Omnis, and especially looking over a frequency band, I realized that our stuff is much better. Now, again, we all cook with gas. I've got 10 engineers that's very good. I love them. But there's no ways they can be any better than guys in America, England, the rest of Europe. And again, I had to say, it's not likely. I mean, I almost have to, and I can explain it a bit with our background, coming from, call it a very hardcore, often involved with military. Our DNA was to design antennas with very high specs. That certainly helped a lot. So that for us, we almost seamlessly extended frequency bands, whereas I didn't realize other people were faltering all over the place because they were claiming increased frequency bands because you're now forced to. But the antennas wasn't doing it properly. They were doing it. But of course, if you haven't designed it actually to work there, I mean, you've seen our X-Pol 2. I looked at it with one other guy's antenna, and they just had like 2 elements in there. Ours has got like elements at every frequency band. I don't know. I want to still put it in some YouTube. We put it in the start of our. We walk into R&D. This other antenna, and it really just looks simple box, few pieces of plate, and then you see the X-Pol 2, and many people may not remember Crocodile Dundee, but do you remember the famous scene when the guy picks out a flip knife in New York?
Exactly.
And he says, "What's that?" And the guy says, "Give you money." He says, "Why?" So I'll stab you with a knife. And then he takes out this massive thing. He says, "That's not a knife. Yes. This is a knife."
Exactly. That's exactly it.
We write that, we say that, I mean, if you look physically at the thing, that's not an antenna. This is an antenna.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly a kind of scene I've played in my mind many times as well. That exact same movie scene.
Oh, you've seen it? Okay.
One of the worst examples, and it's because this was a no-name brand, I can just say it, I guess. It was a directional antenna that I got from just offshore supplier. And it just felt like it's too simple to have the specs that they gave. And it was a MIMO antenna, or basically in that case, MIMO ended up being it has 2 antenna elements in there. But it was just a dipole. Well, just maybe if I simplify it back, just a basic antenna radiator, a metal backplane, and it was in there. And there was 2 of those. So that made it MIMO. But this thing had a working operation from 700 megahertz to 2.7 gig. But it's a dipole in front of a flat plane. And I kind of, how bad is this? Because I mean, it's you're going through so many versions of quarter wave, half wave.
Look, it is horrific. I mean, if you would go look at it, and the problem, David, is that you could see something like that, like say I mean, I could see exactly what you say. The beam will split up, it will spread. I mean, that thing. But of course, I said to someone many times, like a coat hanger, when you are close to a TV, I got my students to design little TV antennas, and they had the same problem. To test them, they couldn't test them in most of the strong signal because, like I say, you can put a piece of coat hanger in the back of your TV and you'll receive a very good picture. That's in the good analog days. And because you're in very strong signal area. Now, that's my problem. That antenna that you're talking about, or it's something that anything radiates. If you put it on and there's good signal, then people tell you, but why do I buy 10 times more expensive? But you're telling me this thing's bad, but it works. And what I've learned is that, okay, if you're mobile, it's a very good argument because that's the work, of course, in many places. So even a single person will very rapidly realize when he's bought a bad antenna, but not necessarily when a guy in a shop says, test this one and test this one. But then guys doing for metering or guys distributing, I would say to them, the scary thing is that bad one, okay, would even at 80% of the time work as well as my good one. That's perhaps 4 times the price. But what people realize is the way we look at statistics, and 20% of the times that one's not going to work. Now, if you're going to roll out 10,000 meters, do you really want 2,000 of them not to work? Fixing up 2,000 meters is a massive job. Your tracking company, those are the first companies, one of the companies locally, Digicore, do fleet management. So the normal theft management, guys use very bad antennas. I almost use not such a nice word. Because, it's only when your car gets stolen that you see whether the antenna works. But the fleet management guys, of course, they use the antennas once they sort of realize that, because at 10% of the time not working for them is complete disaster. It's complete disaster if your customers say, I can't see my vehicles, because they're going to worry about the 10% that they don't see. So, yeah, it really gets down to that. And if you're going to sell nice antennas for internet, and again, it's you can't afford a percentage of people. Do you ever buy? And I said to people, would you love buying a drill or something, or car, and you've got like a 20% chance this thing doesn't work?
Well, that's what it is.
If you buy a car, we buy a car for a third of the price. That's what I often will tell people. We can offer a third of the price, but you have to accept that it may not work. And that is almost what we are saying. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
That's perfect, and that's exactly it as well. Is I actually had a customer yesterday who he wanted to know, will this thing last? And this thing, we were actually talking about an X-Pol too. So, well, the idea is, this is, from my perspective, nothing's future proof, but you want this to work now, and you want to be ready for what's going to come and for foreseeable future. And it's kind of, you solve the customer's problem, you sell a solution. And that's what you were saying about the rebranding as well. It's about not just, in our case, RF shop, and it very much resonates with your rebranding, I think, was you sell a solution, you solve a problem for a customer, because that's why they come to you, and that's what it's about.
I think we were talking and explaining our whole market model, which has really been very successful. We don't try to sell direct to any people, end customer, big or small. Whether it's an end operator, we sell through distributors. But our distributors is not the stuff people think of, like when you think distributors, like big companies with warehouses. All of my distributors are companies. I think I told them, I won't tell people who it is. The biggest distributor is about 6 people, 7, 8. So it's not distributors like the guys that sell into catalogs. It's guys like you, and there perhaps I can see exactly why it's so important that we sell through people like yourself. So we want other people to do our selling for us, because our stuff need to be sold. You can't just put it like in a shop window or on a online shop and people will buy it. You have to do what you're doing, and you have to explain to people. But what is crucial to me is most probably the same as what I say about my antennas, that people, I hope, start trusting the brand. It's much more so for a guy like running RF shop, because what RF shop does effectively is they most probably can know what work, and you've got an engineer like David High sitting there. You know that the list of products that's sitting here, I can actually trust will do the job, because there's lots of people who sell you stuff, and and sell you stuff that won't work. So for me, it's most probably dual branding. I'm actually branding to you guys, but you guys are the final brand, the type of stores that people trust in the regions that they operate in, because other guys will say, go to RF shop if you've got this problem. And why do they go there? They know that instead of them starting on the internet, sort of what's the best LoRa waveguide, the best helium gateway, the best whatever, David sort of does this type of stuff. He really understands it, he knows it, so that when I buy it from him, it will work. Isn't it right? I mean, 90% of the people buying from you don't sit and select this product from you, whatever, and that product from another guy and that connector, because they don't know what's good connectors, cables, um, good routers. I'm never sure what they say in Australia, and good antennas. So they know that David will find the stuff. He may even find some less good antennas, sometimes less, I mean, call it cheaper antennas, but he will be able to say to you, this you can use in this application, it's cheaper. It's clearly not that well. Perhaps the pointing one here you would use. And very much what I'm saying in terms of our products, isn't it? Is because you're that point where people buy it from, and where people trust your company to provide them, and we do that in life, isn't it?
That's the passion that I obviously try to live on YouTube and also through the company is helping people and then knowing it's not just my name and my brand that I would put against it, but it's kind of the satisfaction as well that now I've helped someone and I know hand on heart I'm helping someone with what I believe is absolutely the best option for them. I mentioned this earlier as well, and this is one of my pet peeves. Is people. I mean, of course, you have, for instance, the MIMO 3 series. You have different antennas versions, and they're all sensible. But for me, it's important when I talk to a customer to not just to try to upsell to the more expensive one, because the more expensive one doesn't help them. I need to drill it down to, okay, you want something like in this specific example that I'm thinking of, you want something that solves your Nighthawk M6 or M5 solution. It only has 2 antenna ports. The best one for you is going to be the 12. I'm not trying to upsell to the 15 because it's more expensive. You just stick to the one that really works best for a customer. That's listening and applying what makes sense. And I think for me with Poynting, I mean, as you said, I'm an antenna design engineer, and we do at RF shops at Blackout, we do work. But when we look at what can we do, what kind of solutions do we need to kind of fix, it's always awesome to say, you know what, for instance, the Expel 2, that's done, it's sorted. I don't have to worry about those kind of things. I don't have to think about what can we do to solve an LTE and a 5G antenna. That's sort of, so it makes my life so much easier to kind of work on the niche little things that's still out there, and then have these solutions in behind me that I could say I'm sorted on the Wi-Fi side and on the 4G, 5G side, and I can worry with the other things. So it's kind of, for me, really awesome.
That's where you need the antenna designers nowadays. I mean, and like you say, the last thing on earth would be a good idea to design consumer stuff if there's good stuff out there. But as you know, when you get specialized, and I presume that's what you're working in your own designs, a guy wants something to fit on a specific or integrate with something or have a very specific performance. Yeah, I mean, we're not in that game. We've chosen not to be because, like I say, my previous defense company is very much most probably into that. We're trying to always design stuff that would have a wider appeal, if you know what I'm trying to say, rather than a very specific niche type of market appeal. So the one part I didn't get to, by the way, the little secret of why do we manage to get better? And it's the simplest thing on earth. If I can, like I say, experience many other things. But the real thing that I realize now is that, and it most probably starts with me being an antenna guy, I realize not many of the other consumer guys actually have an antenna person, call it as the driver architect. So what I've seen now happen, and I've seen it physically happen, is they've got very good antenna designers at the bottom, often more. But then as it gets, I mean, it's not like I do all antennas, but at the top somewhere is a guy like me, it's an antenna person that says, no guys, this is not an Omni and so forth. And And I say to the engineers, no, you need to get it right. And that simple process where you're demanding now from the engineers, and because you're the guy at the top somewhere calling the shots, you know what is good. Simple as that. My discerning mind is better than most probably a guy that hasn't got an antenna background and running an antenna company. And if he doesn't say that to his engineers and just say to them, it's typical product development. Here's the specs that we want. We need to be at least as good as the pointing and to this and that antenna. That's how people sort of develop. Engineers would be developing, bringing back. You look at the spec sheet, and amazingly enough, but I mean, I can actually understand it because he's perhaps just an engineering manager with a lot of knowledge on RF. He sees specs on that, and he doesn't actually realize, doesn't focus on. And if you don't give that feedback to engineers, your very good engineers will just not be producing. In other words, it's almost that filter that says what's good and what's bad. If that doesn't exist at the top, then these guys will produce very good antennas, but they produce what you're asking them to, as engineers do. And I think that's because the companies have more simple things and they're working very much to get specs and price and meet at a certain point. And because right at the top, the guy's side is this good enough for us to sell and so forth. He certainly believes it's good enough because he can see it's as good, it's better than some competitors. And that's where it falls apart. It's a little bit more complex than that. So I wouldn't say it's only like an antenna guy like me that can run a good antenna company. But I would say that you need that DNA sitting somewhere, very likely in the founder, but otherwise a founder that is completely different than someone else handling that part. And one could see it with some of the older companies. Katrine, I think that now imploded, unfortunately, 100 years old. But I remember I met the son of the original Katrine starter, and he was a passionate, it was Herr Professor, Herr Professor Engineer Katrine. It was, and that's how he was addressed. He was also a prophet. You could see it was antenna passion, and they were a wonderful company. They did do fantastic things. And when it went to the third generation, the kids, and I'm not saying, I'm guessing, well, that's just my mind, they were not that interested. They didn't study antennas and so forth. And very soon thereafter, I think within 5 years of the son's death, and I met him on shows, very nice guy. The company got sold off in different parts. But I think the excellence was because the grandfather and the founder and the son happened to all have this, and that meant that they got engineers. Engineers, I'm not saying you find them everywhere, they will hate me if I say it, but I think good engineers you can find. But how do you get good engineers to design good antennas? Perhaps that should be my saying.
That's a very good point. I think we should almost wrap it up, but I'm actually just want to think because you bring me so much back to my first job in South Africa, which was under Dirk Baker, for Dr. Dirk
Oh,
Baker.
fantastic. I still work with him, by the way. He
I know.
designed the Anaka chamber.
Yeah, yes, this is also why he actually helped me just the other day.
This guy is still as bright. He's still the brightest guy I've ever
Oh,
known.
he's
Yeah, I love to just sit and talk to him.
yes, no, I asked him something about just a Balun for kind of the spiral antenna, and the amount of papers he sent me and the amount of information he actually just wanted to put on paper, it's phenomenal. And there's absolutely so much truth as an antenna guy to yourself as an antenna, kind of to me, you're kind of a mastermind as well. I've learned so much from Dirk, and he was the boss, and just the mentor that he was in my 5 years.
And look at the antennas that came out of Grintech antennas. Ah, it was excellent stuff. I mean, yeah, no, but he's an admirable guy. I mean, and also, he was so flippant clever, and he could explain to anyone. So we use him sometimes to mentor some of the younger guys, especially on measurements. You can imagine. I mean, he's still as clear, and I remember the first time he had little talks on the conferences we've got locally. We explain measurements, and you think you understand it until he explains it to you, and he explains it so simple. You can, like, again, see a guy that really understands the topic down to the T.
He's incredible, and he didn't hold back. Like if I were ever to make a mistake, I mean, I was a really young engineer back then,
Oh,
so he-
he's a
I still remember
he's
them.
a tough engineer.
No, it's but that's exactly your point. That it is, if you're a niche company and you're a specialist company, it's so good to have that speciality at the top, and then just really mentoring and educating and guiding.
And I think almost, it's a bit of a culture thing, David. I don't think I even, I think, like I say, it's not like I need to stay there. I think what happens now, it's like a DNA, I call it, a culture that you put through. So I believe as the company carry on into the future, that'll be great because you've embedded all of these type of ideas. I mean, and they're more generic than explain to guy what omnis and things are. It's almost what I said to you, this idea that don't look at specs, look at what an antenna needs to achieve. Look very carefully at that and design it to best achieve what it needs to do. And by the way, that's a big part of what I do. I try to also get the engineers closer, sometimes talking to customers and so forth, just to make them realize I'm not this mushroom in a box that does this nerdy magic and do stuff. And say to them, you must all think, don't ever take instructions from me. I mean, always try to find from a customer, not the specs he needs, try to find what is his problem. And I had a fantastic guy that once said to me, don't give the customer what you want to give him. Don't give him even what he's telling you he wants. Give him what he really wants. And that is very, very true in antennas. People telling you often, like, I want an antenna with this spec, that spec, that spec. I much prefer a guy to say to me, I'm going to do this. This is my requirement, because then I can think with my full engineering mind what would be the right antenna for him to do the job. Because often what he tells you he wants may not be actually a good solution. But I think these are all important things in culture and in solution.
That's very true in antenna world, because it's such a specialist field that people just think they know enough to tell you what you want. But like, I'm thinking about the most recent helium experiences we've had. That I actually had. That's one of the videos where I was told off badly, but it's because I have a point of view. Keep it, in that case, was keep it simple, and there's a specific antenna that's quite low gain, but I feel it's low gain and it does a good job. So rather stick to something that is proven and nice and simple and works really well. Everybody just wanted 9 dB. I said, why? Well, we're 9 dB because he said I want 9 dB, and everybody said I need 9 dB. So not necessarily, and also the 9 dBs out there are often questionable, unless you have a good design that's done well. But some of the 9 dB stuff that I saw was like radiation patterns going all over the place, everywhere except to the
As you know, you need multiple elements, they're often in series. So it's so easy to just get the pattern tilted a little up and a little down, and your 9 dB is worse than a low gain. We had it on a marine antenna.
So, and to get that right on the 9 and then to pay peanuts, you're looking for so much trouble. Andre, thanks a lot. I think that was an awesome conversation. I actually would love to keep on talking, but I think we'll probably call it there.
Look, and like in the past, I suppose we must actually have more online peer chats. It's lovely to talking to you, and it's like new things hit one's head all the time. So let's do it both perhaps as a form of podcast, but otherwise in the normal course of things. Thank you very much.
That'll be
For bringing
awesome.
me on.
Thank you. Thanks. And yeah, I'll see you on the next video as well.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.